Hello, everybody, and welcome to Shared Insights, the podcast from BA Insight. I'm Pete Wright, and I'm here with a fantastic guest. We're going to be talking about knowledge management in a time of crisis. Chris Smith is the internal entrepreneur at a major New York-based law firm. He works with the firm's lawyers to identify opportunities and shape creative solutions to their knowledge management and search needs. His specialty is making knowledge management work. And he's with us today to reflect on knowledge management challenges through the lens of our current global context and beyond, of course, COVID-19. Chris, welcome to the show.
Hey, great to be here, Pete.
Now, I introduced this conversation with a nod toward COVID, but I'm thinking that is perhaps too limiting. So let's start by talking about what happens to an organization and our organization's knowledge management sort of platform resilience in times of crisis. Can you take us back a few months? At what point did you recognize things were changing and that you'd need to change your mode of operation?
Let's go back to January. And that's where we started getting early signals of the news and things. We have offices in the PAC rim. So they were catching early signals of this and talking internally about things that are getting ugly in the work environment. So we started thinking, and actually I credit my wife, whose CNN viewership said, "You're not getting on the subway anymore." So I started walking into work pretty early in February, which is good. And it's good. I needed the exercise. So, but anyway, having remote offices gave us a little bit of a remote feeler, so we could be aware of the fact that things were going on. And the collaborative environment and the nature of the work we do here, be it via phone calls or video calls or the email threads that are going on, pretty much made us aware that something significant was happening pretty early on. I think a good 3 weeks before we declared emergency in New York, I pinged a couple of coworkers and started taking odds on whether we were going to shut the office down or not.
Has that ever happened to you at the firm, like shutting the office down in your experience? You've been there a long time.
I've been there a long time, and I have the dubious distinction of having been with the firm through Y2K, 9/11, Superstorm Sandy, and a couple other things that were less horrific. But I'm not a disaster recovery guy. I'm not a prepper, but I don't like getting called in the middle of the night, and I like my systems up. So very early on, I think it really hit home after 9/11 that for things to be available all the time, for people to be able to trust your systems, you have to do an awful lot of upfront work to make sure things are functioning. The number one lesson after 9/11 is that for disaster recovery to work properly, you have to plan on not being there. You want your office, you want your coworkers, everybody to have everything they need to keep working while you go and take care of your family and get safe. And that was a really poignant lesson on that particular day. Just a little background, we are less than a mile from the Twin Towers, and I live 4 or 5 blocks from the Twin Towers. So it was a very real and abrupt situation. So that was 9/11. And my systems, when I say knowledge management, and this is the overarching piece, is getting information to people who need it when they need it. So search is a huge part of that, but there's also other line of business applications that have to be up and running. And our overarching philosophy at the firm is that all information has to be thought of together. So we're constantly, every system is flowing real time into a centralized environment and then made available through a variety of applications in search. This is accounting, time recording, documents, email. They all flow into the same place and process according to permissions and needs from there. So all of that had to keep working through these disasters. 9/11, we did not lose the building, although we lost access to it. So remote access and remote work became a very real thing. At that point, our lawyers weren't as good as they are now for working remotely, but I pretty much taught them when they finally got back to the office, they had to get pretty good at it pretty quickly.
Well, I'd like to digress just a little bit there, because in terms of doing that work, right, training the staff on to be more efficient, to have a greater affinity with the tools that they have available to them, so that they can use them in all kinds of different contexts. I imagine that is, building a resilience state that was not without its own challenges.
You touched on a couple of things right there. You said the word training and lawyers in the same breath, and that's lawyers are very smart people, but they're very busy. And if you say you need to take an hour to learn the technology, they're going to look at you like you have three heads. So everything we do has to be so easy to use that it's intuitive. It's like a Zoom or what have you. You don't
just
want
discoverable.
Yes. Yeah, you want it to make sense. And that's, I think, a significant flaw in a lot of software in general up until probably 2005, 2006. It was just too complicated. It was for techies by techies. But the whole thing about remote work is really interesting, because since we are a distributed workforce, we've always wanted people to work across time zones and across offices and across geographies. And we wanted our systems to foster that. You wanted collaboration and search and availability of information to span time and place. That's a fundamental premise of what we do with knowledge management. You don't want to have people call or be in the same place to get the information they need. So if we were doing things right in the late 90s and 2000, people were starting to figure these things out and work more efficiently in a non-disaster environment. That was the idea. And we had a certain, I'd say, proportion of people that really bought into it and thrived. But we also were aware that this was all optional. People could come into the office and go sit at their desk and have their secretary print out emails and walk them in, and they'd shuffle through their in and their out basket and work much the way they did 140 years ago when the firm started. Then you get Superstorm Sandy. Then you get COVID-19, and the option is called. You have to use this stuff to work effectively. And you're either going to be pleasantly surprised or frustrated that you didn't spend the time to learn how to use these things, or you're going to discover some things that really would have made your life easier months or years ago. And that's kind of what I think not just my organization is going through right now, but there was a meeting of all of the heads of New York law firm knowledge management get together pretty much monthly for lunch. We did a Zoom meeting last week, and everybody was singing the same song. People are discovering things for the first time and using things for the first time, and that's really kind of cool.
It is cool when it is just a little bit difficult to swallow that a catastrophic sort of global event causes them to be able to discover new tools for efficiency.
Yeah, the big problem is awareness. You have to get through the problem of what they're doing day to day, but make them aware of the fact that these things are here. And that can be difficult because you're asking them to leave the mindset of contracts and law and people and going to the idea of how information flows and how applications work. And there's some people that don't make that transition well.
Sure. You said prepare to not be there. So let's move ourselves into reaction mode. And now we have these sort of few days in March where, the world compresses kind of all at once. And talk to us about how you enter that mode and what did that look like for the firm? Really
kind of boring. I'm very pleased to say. The emails went out for conference calls. In early, I think we did an in-person directorate meeting for the support staff in early March. That was the last time we were in person, I think. But after that, it was all conference calls and Zoom meetings. We weren't in emergency mode. From the knowledge management perspective, I'm very happy to say that I wasn't even operationally involved, but the team raised an internal COVID-19 response center that had medical and physical resources for the firm to how to respond, where you're supposed to be, remote working facilities, as well as different practice areas, specific legal information. How do you advise your clients about how to deal with COVID-19? How do you deal with the new laws that were coming out? So we did this internally, and at the same time, external-facing resources were being put up for our clients to see. So all of this was using the platform we have in place. It wasn't an emergency situation. It was just another kind of knowledge that we were dispersing to our team internally and externally. Aside from that, my team is pretty much, for the past 3 or 4 years, we've been about 70% remote working. So I had people in London and Texas and Bangalore, everybody working together on some significant projects. So it was very comfortable to have a morning Zoom and to move on from that. The trick was just getting the lawyers on board. And that really, the first couple days after the edict saying don't come in anymore was difficult for the support staff, but it wasn't it wasn't earth-shattering. It wasn't like we slowed down at all. Mm-hmm. In fact, I spent last week reviewing usage and analyzing usage, and there was really only a small blip in the total amount of usage. There was actually some increases in certain lawyer groups in terms of the amount of knowledge resources that they were using. It was pretty obvious they couldn't get to the offices. So, for instance, every closing set, every document that we have is digitized and stored. So, they couldn't get to the binders sitting behind their desk in their office, but they could get to them digitally.
My next question was going to be, what if any, services or did you find were strained across the sort of KM organization? And it sounds like you didn't feel that.
I'm so proud of the team that it was really uneventful. It was everybody knew what they had to do. The only abnormality was a couple of the very highest partners, were discovering for the first time that this team existed and joined us to raise this COVID-19 response center and to create a special section for the partners. But we just jumped on it. I mean, the team, this is not a place for beginners, never has been. Former executive director, as I was joining there, says, you're not coming to a place like this unless you're a pro and ready to deliver to these very powerful lawyers, and you've got to rise to there and be ready for them. So we were ready and anticipating quite a bit. Anticipation is the huge piece. We were just there for them.
One of the things we've been talking about of late, specifically in the context of adaptation, is the sort of generational adaptation. And you mentioned the senior folks who are able to come to the table and learn. Talk a little bit about how that plays out at the firm.
It's very interesting. I've done a lot of work looking at, the average lawyer, the average age of the workforce right now is about 42 years old. This person was working with Google in college. I'm of a generation before that. I was out of college before the internet was pretty much invented. So there's a certain number of people in the workforce that have that generation. And then you've got our digital natives that were born with an iPad in their hands. So we're seeing a really large variety of people that have comfort levels with technology. And what I have to do has to span all those people. We have to make it useful so that all of these groups of people can share to the certain extent that they will. The one thing I've learned, though, is that you cannot make any assumptions about the people you're working with. Some of the most tech-savvy people I work with are very senior lawyers. There are also some incredibly tech-savvy lawyers that don't have a computer on their desk. It's an amazing thing. They just have a mind that understands the technology, but they don't actually need to physically interact with it. So it's a really mind-blowing thing to work with these guys. They're really smart.
So now we're in, I guess, is it fair to call us in a sort of a chaos state, right? We are now trying to come to terms with what recovery looks like, what it means to resume continuity of business operations. What, if any, lessons do you feel like you've brought away from this, and how do you bring about a new normal at the firm?
Great phrase, new normal. I don't know that resumption of business as usual is something that we or anybody is going to anticipate. What I do think the challenge ahead of us is, certain things are working. Zoom works. You can see somebody, you can talk to them while you're having a conversation, but it's not the same as being in the room. It's not the same as the environment you get from the spontaneity of being in the same physical space as everybody else. There's a lot of work that's been done with creativity. The Medici effect and Stanley Crystal's book in terms of the value of having people with different skill sets and abilities and point of views in the same place. That is the thing that I don't know that we're going to solve unless we get in the same space again.
It's interesting, in preparing for this conversation, I read a piece this morning on the psychology of eye contact, and particularly the power of eye contact for attorneys who use it as a tool, and the absolute categorical deficit that comes from trying to do that work on Zoom, where eye contact is fundamentally broken, always by a couple of inches. That leads to a mile. Nobody's looking at each other's eyes anymore. How do you get anything done?
We really need a laptop that has the camera in the center of the screen.
That's exactly what we need. That's right.
We need to get there. I was watching Microsoft did their Build conferences this week, and they did a wonderful thing. It was all online, and Scott Guthrie was giving his keynote and hosting the entire 90-minute thing. And afterwards, they pulled out, and he's wearing pajamas and dragon slippers. And I said, that's good. I like that.
That's on brand.
So, but not just eye contact, but body language as well. I'd add to that. It's important, and not just the typical negotiating boardroom client attorney situation, but meeting in the hallway. Passing in the stairways. You never know what you don't know in that situation. But how can we digitally come up with an equivalent? I don't know that we can. So it's how we're going to get there, when we're going to get there, how, I don't know. I could foresee easing back in and having office days a couple times a week or having small teams, but even so, it's going to be pretty unsatisfying until you can take the masks off.
Access to information comes with access to devices. And as more and more let's say schools are coming out saying, we're moving to single occupancy, no more shared rooms for the foreseeable future. That increases a demand in terms of, libraries and computer labs. Any shared resources are all but a dinosaur anymore. I'm wondering if you have any impact, or if the firm is going to see any impact on that, of the individualization of devices, iPads, computers, no more shared devices.
I don't see that as an issue. We're pretty much, we're not bring your own device, but we're one-to-one there. So,
any other physical adjustments, any other sort of plant adjustments that you're facing right now as you think about coming back to the offices?
Well, we're in a big tower on the water in Manhattan, so the elevator is going to have to be monitored, so we can only have one or two people at a time, perhaps.
Rush hour is going to be a delight.
Oh, well, rush hour, that's the next topic. People that are commuting, some people several hours each way, is going to be horrible. They don't have the luxury of what I do. I live downtown, so I can walk to work. So they're going to want to stagger the commute so that not everybody's traveling at the same time, so the trains aren't as crowded. Food service. There's a cafeteria in the building. Even before we moved out, we stopped the salad bars, shut down and changed to make it more sanitary. Office and conference rooms. I mean, we have a lovely conference center on one floor in the office, and a lot of those rooms, all the chairs are packed together. All of these things have to be thought through. The firm is also, even before we left, we were having some industrial cleaners come in and nightly, do the whole sprayed sanitation piece. Elevator banks, doors, things were clean. They really made the effort to take care of the physical plant because you don't want people getting sick.
It's a daunting task in terms of information management, though it sounds like the lessons learned of crises past served you well in adapting to this one. What do you think you're going to take away looking at this massive wall of fog that stands before us of the unknown? What do you take away after the last 8 to 12 weeks that you think might serve you going forward in terms of your architecture, systems build, that sort of thing?
I think I'd like to see some broadening of what we're doing. I think we've got the basics done fairly well. I think we can build on the ability for the lawyers to modify and build on their knowledge bases without the help of the staff. I'd like to offer some self-service there. I'd like to expand the environment to make it available to our client base as well. So we're collaborating well internally, and it's very easy to spin up the resources internally. And I'm sure that they wanted to share them with our clients and say, okay, here, you can go here, and have this partition available for them to real time go in there and search the knowledge base of new advice regarding COVID-19 legal implications. That, I think, was a little bit kludgy right now. Our external facing resources are separate from our internal. I think joining those would go a long way. Aside from that, I think if we can build on the awareness we've built with our lawyers regarding the fact that you can get an awful lot done sitting in your pajamas at home, and sometimes it may be a better alternative rather than wait to get to the office the next day or wait to fly to Tokyo. Get on a Zoom, get on a chat.
Well, last question. What are you most excited to see your attorneys, your lawyers adopt that you never thought they'd adopt?
I love that they're using Zoom.
Yeah,
that is great. I love the fact that they're not afraid to turn the camera on, which they weren't for a long time. I really was extremely pleased to see the amount of time, particularly the associates were spending in our Knowledge and Resource Center on our knowledge platform. So much effort went into laying out and creating collections of useful information for not just COVID-19, but for everything we do. To see people find it and use it was very gratifying. What I am looking forward to doing is again analyzing the types of usage that we're getting post COVID-19 or post remote work versus pre. So look at the type of searches that people are doing. Look at the usage patterns. See what's changed. What are people searching for? They're no longer looking for the cafeteria menu, but they are looking for benefits information. They're no longer looking for local things, but they are looking at videos about how to use technical resources, how to use a document compare that they never did before. So that's kind of interesting. What I want to do is analyze that and look at and compare that to the effectiveness of the lawyers. So I have good metrics as far as how the lawyers, particularly the associates, perform on different matters. But I'm going to see are the lawyers who are actually using these resources performing better in the eyes of their superiors? Are they saying, okay, this is a better associate because they know how to use these resources and they do so?
No time like the present. If they'll do that, surely they'll do XYZ, sort of a push, right?
Well,
There's a lot to learn.
And if they learn it, it makes their life easier. That's the key. If they can get through this and say, okay, because I did this, it was so much easier, I'm going to do this in the future. That's where you win.
Well, this is a fascinating conversation. You exist in a fascinating space, and I appreciate you joining us to share a little bit of your world here, even in quarantine.
Happy to do so, Pete. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Chris Smith. And thank you, everybody, for downloading and listening to this show. We appreciate your time and attention. We'll be back next week with Shared Insights, the podcast from BA Insight.